Hi again, everybody. My name is Greg Anderson, and this is the Good Timekeeping Show with Greg Anderson. Normally I talk about clocks and watches on this show, and today I want to talk about timers, specifically the kind of timers that you install in your house. Now, I like timers. I like timers that control my sprinklers, turn them on and off at predetermined times. I like timers that turn off the TV after a certain amount of time. I like automated things like that. I don't get too crazy about automating my home, but one thing that I discovered a long time ago that I really like is to use a timer on a bathroom fan. Now, I can go on about reasons you might want to use a bathroom fan, obviously. I mean, let's not be kidding ourselves here. Sometimes you want to just clear the air and get the odors out of the bathroom, just freshen up that air. I also discovered long ago that when you take a hot shower, a hot bath, and if the mirror gets steamed up, well, you can mitigate that quite reasonably well, sometimes just by turning on the bathroom fan before you turn on the hot water. And so I notice sometimes when I'm using the bathroom and I have the fan on, and I'm finished in the bathroom, I go to leave, and I think, well, I'm leaving, but I think it would be good to leave this fan on for just a few minutes longer. So I say to myself, I'll just leave the fan on, and I will go, and I think I'll come back in about 10 or 15 minutes and turn the fan off. Well, too often when I tried that, I would come back 2 hours later and realize the fan was still on, and think, there's got to be a better way. So I discovered timers. And so let me show you. A typical bathroom maybe would have two switches on the wall, one for the light, one for the bathroom fan. And they're really both the same kind of light switch. Let's say it looks like this one. So, it just one's hooked up to a light and one's hooked up to a fan. And so otherwise, it's the same switch. So if you could take the switch that's going to the fan and you could exchange that with a timer switch, that would be an easy way to then, you could set the timer for, say, 15 minutes, walk away, and not worry about it because after 15 minutes, it turns itself off. So you could get something like this, which would be an easy thing to switch out. It's mechanical, so it doesn't need any extra electricity to run any kind of circuits inside of it. It's just a switch. You wind it up, and it makes a little bit of a ticking noise. I don't know if you can hear that. And then when it reaches the end, it makes a kind of a loud click, and that's all it is. So that's easy to do. Sometimes you might want to put in some sort of electronic timer. So now I'm going to talk to you about the electrical wiring in your home and how you might be able to make a switch from a switch like this and swap it out for something like this. Now, I am not an electrician, licensed, bonded, and insured, and professionally working as an electrician. And just because you watch my video, that doesn't mean you are a professional electrician, licensed, bonded, and insured. So, trust your feelings, as they say. If I tell you something and you think, well, that looks simple enough, but I don't think I want to do it myself, then certainly don't do it yourself. Find a friend and or neighbor and or brother-in-law who's a bit of a handyman, who knows how to do this stuff. Could be a sister-in-law. And let them help you with it. Or if you go so far as to say, I'll just hire a licensed, bonded, and insured electrician to make this swap for me, that's fine too. Just know that it's a pretty easy walk in the park for an electrician, a professional, to make a swap like this. It'll probably take them about as long to write up the bill as it will to actually do the work. So keep that in mind. Now, what if I have a picture of myself with a famous person who's a podcaster, who's also a pretty skilled handyman, carpenter, and overall contractor? Does that make me a good enough authority on teaching you how to do this? No. What if I had a picture of myself with another famous guy on YouTube that I love his work, and he's also named Adam, the professor of rock? What if I've met him before? Would that make me more credible? I don't think so. What if I put on this attractive hat? Would that make it more believable that I can teach you how to do this? No. None of this means I'm teaching you how to do this. I'm confident that what I'm going to show you is something you could learn. However, Just because I'm teaching it to you does not mean you've actually learned it and that I've taught it well, but I can give you some of the basics of home electrical wiring. If you could remove the drywall and insulation from the walls in your home, you would likely find wires like this inside the wall, either this one or this yellow stuff. It's a little more stout. Okay, and so as you can see from, this is a little setup in our furnace room, right? So it's not a fully finished room. And you can see that where the wire comes up into this little box where the switch is, and then it continues outward from the box and all the way up to the light fixture. Okay, so the wire you're seeing would be similar to this. And if you strip away the exterior insulation, there are actually 3 wires inside there. There's one that's white, one that's black, and then this one is kind of an uninsulated copper. Okay, so when you're making the connection to a light, you go from the circuit breaker panel out to the light. It's these wires that are making the run to the light, right? So typically the white wire would be the neutral wire. And they have one of these fancy caps that they screw on there that helps to make the connection for the white wire, and then that protects that, and that is what it is. Now with this copper wire, people might just twist that together and you don't really need a cap on that. And that leaves just this black wire, which is the load wire or the hot wire. And so this is the wire that when these two touch together, that completes the circuit, and that turns on the light. So the switch you have is just something that physically inside of it can make this connection between these 2 wires. That's as simple as it is. So here on the side of the switch, you see that there are 2 screws. And so one black wire goes to one screw, one black wire goes to the other screw, and when you snap the switch there, on or off, all it's doing is either connecting those 2 black leads inside here or disconnecting them. And that's the same thing this is doing, just connecting the black with the black or disconnecting. With most homes, you're going to see all 3 of these wires inside the little box behind the switch. But with some homes, especially older homes, maybe these other wires aren't in there and all you have is the 2 black wires in there. And so if you've got that, then it's easy enough to get one of these wind-up timer switches and you're good to go. But if you want an electronic timer, you're going to have to tap into this white one as well, the neutral wire. So if you look on the packaging, it might say, you've got some kind of smart switch or something, it might say, does require or does not require neutral wire. That's what they're talking about. You need access to this white wire because you're going to have to tap into that because the timer itself is an electronic device. And if you only have these 2 black wires going into it, that's not enough to power it. It needs, just like the light fixture that is being powered, it needs something off of this white in order to make it work, and most likely also the ground wire has to be connected as well. So as long as things are connected to the right things, everything should be safe, everything should be okay. But before you start touching these things for real in circuits that are actually already installed in your house, you gotta go to the circuit breaker box and make sure you turn off the circuit breaker that's providing power to these wires that you're going to be touching, because you could, you could have some trouble if you touch live wires. So make sure you go to the circuit breaker, turn them off. Usually the circuit breakers are labeled, and if they're not clearly labeled, you can at least go around and turn on the switch and see if the light works or not. And if you turn the switch and the light's not working, then most likely you have found the right circuit breaker to turn off, and you've depowered that switch and the light that goes with it. And then, with no power going to it, it would be safe to start working on it. This, by the way, is one of those electronic timers, so it has buttons there. So rather than turn the dial and have that little spring-activated timer, you push a button for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30, 60, 2 hours, or 4 hours to turn on your fan or whatever it is you're going to power with this, and then it'll count down internally. It doesn't make that constant ticking noise that you would get from this one, but it does make a little bit of a more pronounced click when it's turned on or off. So just keep that in mind. So this has 4 wires coming out of it. Okay, the white wire, we recognize that as it connects to the white wire I told you about earlier. The green wire, this connects to that uninsulated ground wire, that copper wire, so green for ground. And then these two are the ones that would connect to the black wires. And so what you have is you have one here, the black wire. This would be the power coming in from the circuit breaker, and this red one is the one going out to the light fixture. So make sure you know the difference between those two, and you can figure that out with the proper tools. And then you could install this, so long as there is enough room. You'll see that with both of these, you need a little bit more space inside the box than you do with this one. It's not too bad, and usually there is enough space for that. But if you're going to be installing one of these extra timers, just be prepared. It might be a tight fit to get all those wires and everything shoved back into that box before you put it all back together. Now for this demonstration, I'm using our family playhouse that I built last year, a very simple circuit breaker box in here, and I know that if I do this one, that takes care of my overhead lights, and that means the light switch is also not getting any electricity because I just switched off that circuit breaker. All right, now that that's turned off, I'm going to remove these screws and start to get this undone here. I'm going to take this switch out. Seems like I just barely installed this switch, but here we go. And inside the box, we have this switch, which I attached a ground wire to the switch right there. And then I've got the two blacks going in, and I do have access to the white neutral wire right there. So with this kind of thing, I can install any kind of switch I want. First, I need to take off this old switch. Now from here, there's a couple things I can do to safely test this out. If I put caps over these wires right here, so that I'm not taking as much of a risk of touching the bare wires there, I can actually now turn the switch back on and do a quick test with this non-contact line tester. What this does is it tells me which wire has electricity running through it. So I turn this on and give it a shot. Right there, it's showing green, which means it's safe, which means there's no electricity running through that right now, but this one has electricity coming into it. And I learned that without even having to touch something, because I have this non-contact tester. Pretty good tool to have if you're going to do a lot of this kind of work. And as you can see, it's safe. I didn't shock myself. Now, if I were installing one of these timer switch that winds up here, one of these switches, what I would have to do here is, remove some of the hardware that's on here and get it down to the bare switch. And, here's top and bottom. It's labeled line and load here. So what I would want to do, and I've turned off the circuit breaker again, so it's safe to touch these now. The line in, I would go ahead and insert that. There's a hole in through here, and I would make the electrical connection. There's a screw in there that I could tighten that down. And then I'd take this other one, and I would put it through the other hole in the side here, and tighten that up really nicely. And if I had both of those things tightened on there really nicely, and I pushed all these things back into the box, then I'd be good to go, and I could have this as my timer. If instead I wanted one of these electronic timers, what I would do is, now I got the 4 wires here. I would take the ground wire, the green wire, and I would just use one of these caps to twist that around the ground right there. I take this white wire and I twist that around one of these caps right here with the two white wires, and I would twist it onto all 3 of them until it feels tight, and now that's connected there. And then right here, my black wire, I would take this one and I would attach this to the one that was a live wire before. Okay, and I would use one of these caps and twist it around until that's nice and tight, safely connected there. And then I would take this red wire, which is the load wire, and twist it onto this one here. So now those are all ready to go. And typically I wouldn't want to test this with everything still opened up like this, but I think I can do this safely, and this is one of those things where I probably say don't try this at home. But right now I've got it to where these are all capped off, so I shouldn't be touching any live wires even after I've turned the circuit breaker back on. Now the circuit breaker is on, and if I just go here and press the 5-minute button, look at that. It's working. So at this point, what I would want to do is make sure the circuit breaker is off again and push all of these wires comfortably back into that box, and then just use the screws. I take this plate off and use the screws to put everything back together. And that's what I would do if this were my bathroom and I wanted a countdown timer there. This particular timer has a button for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30, 60, 2 hours, and 4 hours. And if I push that button, the little blue light blinks for a second and then stops blinking. And then 5 minutes later it'll turn itself off. Or I can interrupt that by pressing this large button at the bottom. Now I kind of like a different setting than the default. If I hold these two top buttons for just a couple seconds together, then I get a blink down there indicating I've changed the way these buttons will display. Now, if I push the 5-minute button, for example, that blue light will stay on for the duration of the timer. If before it stops, I want to change that, say, no, I'd rather add 10 more minutes to that, then just press the 10-minute button, or 2 hours, or whatever it is, and then I can again stop it with the large button down there. So I like the way this works. I probably will never use the 2-hour or 4-hour buttons there, but it's nice to know they're there in case I need them. I found another one of these where the buttons are labeled differently, and so it only lasts 1 minute, 5 minutes. The longest duration is 30 minutes on that one. Looks the same except the durations are different. So you have that option as well. Just choose carefully if you want one or the other. Don't, by mistake, order the wrong one, because they do look almost the same except for the individual buttons are labeled differently. So that's it. That's how I swapped out the switches so that now my bathroom fans are controlled by timers instead of just the simple light switch style switches. So you can get those countdown switches at typical places you would look for hardware, the Home Depot and Lowe's and those sorts of stores, along with online, maybe Amazon. And I found that if you go to the various websites of these companies, that's where you might find more options. For example, if you want a countdown timer that's only 30 minutes, or one that's an hour, or one like this one is a 4-hour countdown timer, you're going to find those options online more than you might find them at your local store on the shelf there. And I found that the prices, depending on how you shop, somewhere between $20 and $25 right now. Both the mechanical and the electronic ones are about the same price. So take a look around, see what you need, and if you need to, maybe even take a look inside the little box where the switch is and just double check before you get too involved in the process. And of course, be safe, and consult with a friend or a relative or both if you need to before you start digging into the electrical stuff. All right, so now that I've done that and I've sort of renewed my confidence that I can do simple home electrical work, what's the next step? Am I going to be so bold as to get something like one of these smart Wi-Fi switches and install these so that I can control some of the lights and things around the house over the phone with an app? What are the chances I'm going to do something like that? Well, I'll tell you what, the chances are 100%. And so you'll learn more about that in another video I'm going to make very soon, so please come back for yet another episode of the Good Timekeeping Show.